Hello, and welcome to Politics for the People. I'm your host, Michael Striano. Thanks for listening and joining in the conversation. You can find links to our Patreon and Instagram in the show notes and sign up for our weekly newsletter. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't, and leave a review wherever you get your podcasts to help others find the show. Okay, let's get to it. This week, we'll take a look at presidential transitions. We hear about them every 4 years, even if an incumbent wins re-election. But what are they, and why do they matter? More pointedly, why is it important that they go smoothly, and what does that even mean? First off, let's start with a definition. A presidential transition is a transferring of power from one administration to another following an election. This happens whether or not there is a new president, because there is always some turnover, even in the case of re-election. What do I mean by turnover? Well, it's said that members of the executive branch serve at the pleasure of the president, and are chosen because of specific strengths and expertise. When a president is appointing individuals to serve on their cabinet, or just to work in various departments, those people are not randomly chosen. Every president comes into office with a list of goals and priorities depending on what they wish to accomplish during their term and what the country needs at that time. We talked about this in greater depth in our episode about the cabinet, which will be linked in the notes, so check it out if you haven't. This is why transitions happen even if the president themselves isn't changing. Think about how much the world changes just every year or two, let alone every 4 years. Along with a quickly changing world, problems and solutions must change, and so the president will likely want to surround themselves with different advisors and experts in different fields. As these goals and priorities change, so do the approaches. And generally speaking, politics isn't about problems. We can all usually agree on what problems exist and what needs attention. Differences arise in the addressing and solving of those problems. So, as transitions are happening, we can get a pretty good indication of the incoming president's priorities and how they'll likely approach solving problems. When an incoming president wants to outline and push their policy goals to the forefront, one of the first real practical steps they take during the transition is announcing cabinet nominees. These announcements allow the president-elect to get a jump start in a way towards achieving their priorities. It can be easy to think of our government as the leaders and just a few people spearheading the day-to-day operations. But a fully staffed federal government employs a significant number of people. That takes time, and you want the government to be as ready as possible on day one to hit the ground running, not taking weeks and weeks filling enough low-level positions to actually start working. With that in mind, I should note that it's not uncommon for some people to stay on for a time between administrations. Just because there's a new president doesn't mean everyone working for the government is fired, and it takes time to fully staff agencies. Experience definitely helps too, and as new people come in, veterans help get them up to speed. After all, we all want the government to function. Another important aspect to keep in mind is the presidency is a big job that isn't actually all that well defined. The Constitution lays out some basic responsibilities, but doesn't go into detail at all. Instead, presidents, going back to John Adams, rely on precedent, or what past presidents have done. The idea of precedent is very strong in our government for a variety of reasons. It offers consistency and continuity, making it easier to frame the government and hold elected officials accountable. And it allows the country to avoid being flung into chaos. The Supreme Court relies upon precedent when they're unsure of how to decide a case, just like Congress relies on it to help ensure orderly proceedings. We're so used to precedents that when someone breaks with them, we don't always know quite how to react. It's a strong idea that helps keep us grounded, even though it can sometimes stand in the way of progress and even the well-being of the country. After a new president is elected, they rely on precedent to prepare them for the job as much as possible. They begin being treated like the commander-in-chief, receiving the president's daily briefings and highly classified intelligence information, because the last thing anyone wants is the person in charge not to know what's going on. What might seem like the most basic part is the idea of unity. Regardless of who wins the presidency, tens of millions of people voted for someone else. So the president-elect uses the weeks between Election Day and Inauguration Day to reunite the country and present one unified vision of where the country will go in the next 4 years and what they will look like on personal, national, and international levels. It's not an accident that presidents tend to get an uptick in approval numbers shortly after the inauguration. The country gets to see them do the job and look presidential. One of the main things to keep in mind with presidential transitions is our country never has more than one president at a time. There isn't an overlap where the outgoing president helps the incoming president get used to the job and make sure they're comfortable before leaving. The transition is the president-elect's opportunity to get as close as possible to 100% ready for their first day on the job. If the transition happens as planned, there will be no interruption in the normal course of business for the government. There will simply be someone else in charge. This is what people mean by a smooth transition. There aren't any slip-ups or bumps in the road. It's seamless. It's easy to see how large of an undertaking a transition is when you think about all the turnover and different people coming in to lead departments and oversee the running of the entire country, to say nothing of foreign affairs. A smooth transition not only benefits the residents of the United States, but the entire world. Thanks for listening, and a special thanks to our patrons on Patreon for your help in making this happen, and all those who have left us a review. Be sure to check out the show notes, where you can sign up for our weekly newsletter and follow us on Instagram at Politics for the People Podcast. Want to help shape the conversation, have a say in episode topics, and get exclusive content, including early access to episodes and live conversations with me? Check the show notes, head on over to our Patreon page, and subscribe for as little as $3. We'll see you Wednesday with our newsletter, and Friday with a brand new episode. Take care.